Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. Today, my guest is Moriah Engelberg from A Better Balance. She's the organizer for the campaign to improve disability benefits in New York. Moriah, welcome to North Country Matters. It's great to have you here to explain these two important programs for workers in New York State.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all of the work that you're doing.
Well,
Um,
it's our pleasure to have you. So, first of all, Moriah, please tell us a little bit about yourself and the organization you work for, A Better Balance. Not everyone is familiar with the work you and it do, but certainly what it does is improve life for us here, for sure. But you're kind of a hidden treasure, aren't you?
well, hopefully we can get out, Better Balance's legal advocacy organization whose mission is to fight for policies protecting American workers from having to choose between caring for themselves and their families and maintaining their economic security. We helped lead the coalition in 2016 to enact paid family leave in New York. And currently, there are 13 other states and Washington, D.C. that have robust paid medical leave programs. I also want to say we have a free confidential legal helpline, and that phone number is 1-833-NEED-ABB. So 1-833-633-3222, available in English and Spanish. We have incredible lawyers who not only work on policy, but do direct service. So if anybody has any kind of leave related questions, we're the place to go. We've got a really wonderful team of lawyers. So I work as an organizer for the campaign to strengthen paid medical leave in New York, also known as disability benefits, also known as temporary disability benefits, something that hasn't been touched since 1989.
Okay, so we know that there is also a move afoot federally to enact paid family leave, but it's kind of a heavy lift right now, given everything that's going on in Congress. So this is really a state by state campaign in many ways, isn't it? So let's start out by talking about the campaign to improve temporary disability benefits in New York that you oversee. What benefit programs are we talking about here? And can you tell us something about their history in our state?
Yeah, and that's a great flag. This campaign in particular is only for New York State. This is not a federal campaign, but we are hopeful to continue to see ripple effects and movement in Congress. But in New York, temporary disability insurance was initially created in 1949 to provide benefits for people experiencing serious off-the-job illness or injury and problems with their pregnancy. The last time we saw this bill touched was in 1989. Since 1989, the benefit has been capped at $170 a week without job protection or guarantee of health insurance. In 1989, $170 might have been a workable amount of money, but it's a preposterous amount of compensation to offer now. I don't think I have to tell you that $170 a week is not enough to survive anywhere in New York. This lack of job protection and continuation of health insurance means that while you're on medical leave, you could lose your job and lose your health insurance in the middle of a health crisis. I simply can't imagine a worse time to deal with the uncertainty and potential medical debt. So on the other hand, we have something called paid family leave. Paid family leave entitles you to take paid protected job leave with the guarantee of your health insurance. You can take up to 12 weeks of this paid protected job leave to take care of another person or to bond with a new child. So when you put these two programs together, when you really kind of think about them, what can happen and what has happened, that if if your dad breaks his leg outside of work, you as the caretaker receive 67% of your average weekly wage up to a certain cap. You have job protection and you're going to continue to have your health insurance. But your father, the person who's injured, can only receive $170 a week without job protection or job insurance. You wouldn't think that New York would be a state that falls so far behind, but we do. We're way behind 13 other states and Washington, D.C. in our paid family and medical leave policies.
Well, that is a sobering statistic, isn't it? Because generally when these things happen, it's not through anybody's fault. And here you are caught really on the jaws of a huge conundrum. So, Moriah, tell us how these two programs are paid for.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things too, just as you mentioned, it's like this emergency or something that happens, or in the case of, bonding, but yeah, absolutely. But it's a great question. So paid family leave is entirely employee funded through small payroll deductions. Our personal medical leave system, known as temporary disability insurance, is a shared cost between employers and employees. So for most of us, if you look on your pay stub, you'll see a small deduction for PFL, paid family leave, and DI, disability insurance, which covers your paid medical leave. Temporary disability insurance law requires that the cost be split between employers and employees. But in fact, because the benefit level has been so low, many employers have not contributed to this fund in some time. So that is really how both programs end up being paid for.
Okay, thanks. So, you're a person who's either become disabled or has to take care of somebody who is disabled or injured. How do people access either of these plans, and are there barriers to the access to the way things stand right now?
Yeah, so you have to apply for both programs. To begin, you should ask your employer for the name and the contact information of their insurance company. You then have to contact the insurance company to receive the proper forms. But if your employer doesn't provide them, you can seek them out from the state website. For both programs, for paid family leave and temporary disability insurance, documentation is required. And you should confirm with your employer if you need to submit directly to the insurance company or if the employer will do that for you. But again, if it's been a few weeks and you haven't heard from your insurance company or you've done all the steps, I will throw in our helpline again to give us a call, 1-833-NEED-ABB. But in the question of barriers, it's a really good question. One of the big barriers about temporary disability insurance is that not a lot of people know that this is a benefit that exists in New York. I worked in social services for 4 years before I had this job, and I had like a very deep understanding of the kinds of city and state benefits that that exist in New York, but I had not once ever heard of temporary disability insurance. I was, like I think a lot of people are, familiar with paid family leave, but I thought that you could take paid family leave for yourself if you needed to. But the key here is that paid family leave can only be used to take care of another person and or bond with a new child, whether it's a foster child or an adopted child, or a biological child. You can't take paid family leave for yourself. Another big barrier is that the benefit level, as we've mentioned, is simply too low. $170 a week doesn't cover your groceries, doesn't cover your electricity, and certainly doesn't cover your rent. And then on top of that, if you're the main breadwinner for your family, I don't think I have to tell you that $170 a week is simply too much, too little to take care of the whole rest of your family. And personal medical leave is your job is not protected, and nor is your health insurance, which leaves you in an incredibly precarious position. And on top of that, you're dealing with what is likely a very scary time health-wise. And you're dealing with all of this anxiety, maybe trying to focus on your making sure that you are better. So we're really hoping that we can change this year.
Okay, one of the things that you just mentioned was that the employer carries the insurance. That means there is no single insurer, is there? They can the insurers choose who they get their insurance from, or does the state provide that?
No, so there are different kind of plans. And so it is important to know who your insurer is, and your employer will have that information. But we've also seen that some of our lawyers have seen that this has been kind of an issue that has risen up, that maybe that information is not so transparent. So we're trying to ensure that all of this information is clear and transparent for all workers.
Yeah, I can see that could be a real problem, especially if you wait until after something happens to start investigating this, because then you're already kind of behind the eight ball, aren't you? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So we've written that into one of the bills I think that we're talking about in a little
Okay.
bit, is just to make sure that that is um, clear and transparent information.
Okay. So let's talk just a little bit more about why you as an individual can't use family paid leave to take care of yourself, because that seems like a hole in the program, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the idea here is that paid family leave is really care for another person, and temporary disability insurance, paid medical leave is your own personal medical leave. And it can kind of, the way that right now it has played out is just that it can create kind of a complicated scenario. So let's say your partner develops a serious illness and you're their primary caretaker. PFL is great because it allows you as the primary caretaker to be able to take this job, protected, paid time off with your health insurance, whereas the person who is seriously ill is compensated with only $170 a week with no job protection, no guarantee of health insurance. This means that those who are facing a major medical crisis are facing extremely traumatic financial situations. You know, most landlords aren't going to adjust your rent to accommodate the loss of income. And we've seen people struggle to put food on the table, lost housing, face medical debt with no way to pay that debt back without the job. And then on top of that, you're also dealing with what is likely a very scary or anxiety provoking situation because you're taking time off of work for any kind of serious illness, injury, or any kind of really anything that you would need to take time off to take care of yourself. So for people battling cancer or managing substance use treatment, or really anything that you would need to take time off, you really should never have to be worried about if you're going to make rent. So by strengthening our paid medical leave system, folks will be able to really focus on their recovery, and nobody should ever be forced to sacrifice their health for a paycheck. But it's this idea of, you know, paid family leave is, it allows you as the caretaker to be able to take care of somebody else. And we just have to make sure that we have the same kind of protections and benefits for those who are sick themselves.
Sure. Are there time limits to paid family leave and to TDI in terms of how many weeks you can actually take the protection?
Yeah, so for paid family leave, it's a 12-week cap. And then for temporary disability insurance, it is a 26-week cap. And most people don't necessarily need to take the 26 weeks of temporary disability insurance, but it's based on medical necessity. So if you do need to take that 26 weeks, you have something that's very complicated, you are able to take that full time. So yeah, there are some time limits. But again, both of, you know, for temporary disability insurance, you do have to have medical documentation that states that you do
Uh,
need this time.
when we talk about paid family leave, does that 12 weeks have to be taken in a block, or can it be broken up into smaller chunks as needed to take care of the situation?
Yeah, so this is a great question. In paid family leave, you are allowed to take paid family leave intermittently, meaning you can kind of take it one block here, one block here. But right now in temporary disability insurance, intermittent leave is not actually covered. So this is one of the things that we're um, really hoping to change, and we've been championing in the bill that's being championed by Senator Ramos and Assemblymember Szilagyi, to that includes and incorporates intermittent leave, which is so important for so many people. Again, if you're fighting cancer and you need to take maybe 1 week of chemo and then you have 3 weeks off and you feel like you, or maybe, you know, you've got 2 weeks, 2 days of chemo, and then you need kind of the rest of the week to recover, ready to go back to work. So it's really, it's critical that we have intermittent leave for people who need to take time off for themselves. So that's, yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, and that's a great example. And anybody who's ever had a family member go through cancer has seen that exact scenario play out. So these two are really critically important programs, but they both need to be improved and modernized. What does your campaign want to see happen to these programs?
Yeah, we've made some really wonderful steps in New York. So last year, two legislative champions, Senator Ramos and Assemblymember Szilagyi, introduced a really strong bill that would create a robust integrated paid medical leave system. This year, the governor also included paid medical leave into her budget. That budget, some of these elements were included in her proposed budget. That budget included an increase of the TDI benefit within 5 years to 67% of the average weekly wage, up to a cap of 67% of the statewide average weekly wage. That essentially just means that there's a cap. If you're making $1 million a year, you're not going to be getting that full $1 million a year salary. She also included job protection and health insurance. And just last week, the state Senate and Assembly published their budget proposals, which include important additional elements of our legislation. So now legislative leaders in the government will meet and decide on a final budget. And we're working really hard with our coalition members and our legislative champions to ensure that all of the important improvements in both paid family leave and temporary disability insurance are contained in that final budget.
Yes, and we know that when we get to this point in the budget, there's a lot of negotiation between the three. So when they all start out sort of in the same place, that's pretty hopeful, isn't it?
Yeah, we're really, really, really excited. There are a couple of elements that we're really pushing for as well. We would really love to see a swift implementation of some of the most important aspects of this bill that would create a workable benefit for all New Yorkers. One of the things that we're really pushing for is progressive wage replacement. This would allow workers to get a higher percentage of their paycheck. There's still that cap that's going to exist. But without progressive wage replacement, the benefit may still be too low for low wage earners to use. If you're making minimum wage, 67% of an already tight paycheck is simply too tight. So incorporating progressive wage replacement will ensure that all workers can take needed time off. And we really want to see parity between these two programs. I know I also touched on intermittent leave, but again, this is something that allows workers to take time off periodically, a day a week, 1 week a month. And this can be really essential for all kinds of people who need it. For example, if you're on chemotherapy, or if you have any, maybe a substance use disorder you're in treatment for, you might need a day off here and there. So intermittent leave is in paid family leave, and it really has to be incorporated into temporary disability insurance. And I know this is giving you a lot of information, but the bill is really robust. And part of the reason why the bill is so robust is because it was drafted with the help of our legal team after hearing some of the things that had risen on their clinic calls. So we want to make sure that we're addressing the needs of freelancers and self-employed New Yorkers by creating portable benefits and a more feasible opt-in system. But even this conversation doesn't encompass the entire bill drafting. But A Better Balance has helped write and pass really incredible, robust laws for paid family and medical leave in 13 other states and DC.
So this will really, if this passes and gets in the budget, this will really bring New York State up to the standard. Is that correct? That other states have, or will we still be on the low side?
No, I mean, if we get progressive wage replacement and some of the things that our legislative champions are also championing, we will be in like a really wonderful, really great place. I mean, progressive wage replacement is so critical for so many people for a lower wage. And, it's not just necessarily even just the lowest wage earners, but really anybody. There are a lot of people in New York who are living paycheck to paycheck. So we need to make sure we're as close as possible.
Yeah, that makes a good point. And there are a lot of programs that really need this kind of budget a look, don't they? Because they are when these programs are set in law and then they aren't looked at for another 20 years, there's no way they've kept up with inflation, cost of living, any of these things. And you're quite right when you say that no one on any form of minimum wage can afford to live in any state in this country. You can't pay rent, you can't eat, you can't do all the things you have to do. So it's really important that some of these programs ensure that people can have a living wage system that actually works for them. So,
Yes, 100%. And I'm not a lawyer, but I've learned that you should never put a number when you're drafting a bill because that number isn't going to adjust or index for inflation, which is kind of how we ended up with this $170 a week number is because that's what's been written into the bill, which really hasn't kept up with any of the rates of inflation or, it's just kind of a shocking number to see now. So yeah, very much so.
yeah, this was very similar to what happened during COVID when a lot of people ended up on their state uh, unemployment figures, and the federal government raised everybody up by $600 because some states are so low. And everyone who lost their job in that situation, it was through no fault of their own. So
Mhm,
a
mhm.
lot of this kind of thing really does need to be looked at in terms of with a clause that includes inflation and some of these other things, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we are not going to be, our wonderful legal team has not written numbers into the bill, so we can make
Mhm.
sure that it is something that, we won't be wondering in, 2040, how could we have thought X amount of number would have been sufficient? I mean, hopefully not, but so we can see this kind of bill is able to really adjust to the time
Sure,
as needed.
sure. So, right now we're waiting for the budget negotiations to go through. As soon as that happens, and if from the sounds of things, something positive will happen on both these programs because all the players seem to be in line with that. How quickly will these programs actually go into effect so that people can expect to get a decent TDI or a decent paid family leave amount that actually reflects actual costs?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question. We've seen, I would say that the governor, the Senate one house and the Assembly one house all have different kind of variations of when that might happen. And some start as quickly as 2025. And some start in 2026. But the idea the longest term option would be in 5 years. So that's the longest term option. And we're hoping to see that kind of that runway. And not to say that it's that there's like a lead up, there's like an implementation, a phase in the longest proposal, which is the 5 year plan. But so there will be some movement within the next year or two, but hopefully we can see that ramp up be even shorter than 5 years. So that is the longest possible for like the full implementation is 5 years. But that doesn't mean that you're going to get $170 still, but it's a phase
It'll
up.
take a while. It'll
Yeah.
take a while to get there. And that's one of the things that we often see in New York State is these long implementations, which although they granted they do sort of average the costs out over a number of years, it doesn't change the need immediately for people. So that's something that hopefully the uh, the negotiators are thinking about what people really need to see happen and how quickly they need to see it happen. So as we wrap up here, Moriah, give us your final thoughts on this and what you hope to have happen, and what can we as citizens do to help make this happen?
Yeah, I mean, we're so excited that to see that the governor and both legislative houses have agreed that we really need to improve TDI benefits and create a strong integrated paid medical leave program. We're really encouraged that both the Senate and the Assembly will be negotiating to achieve a stronger benefit that includes progressive wage replacement, intermittent leave, and other really important aspects of the Ramos-Solage bill. And these are some additional elements that are just so important to ensure that all workers can use this benefit when they need it. And it's really exciting that for the first time in 35 years, we've got paid medical leave on the table. We've got a lot of issues ready to be bargained for. And I will say that as citizens, we do have a call to action. It's important to urge our leaders, Governor Hochul, Majority Leader Stuart Cousins, and Speaker Hasty to create and fund an integrated paid medical leave system that contains the elements of the Ramos-Solage bill, which is S2821B and A 4053B. So if you want to call on your leaders, it's time to that New York has a real paid medical leave system that works for all of us. So yeah.
And we can be the leaders that we'd like to think of ourselves as when we get that thing. I will be sure to put all that information in our show notes so that
Thank you.
anyone who watches this will be able to take advantage of the information that you've shared. I really appreciate you coming in today to do this. These are such important programs for the average working person who, as we all know, is not making $4 million in wages.
No.
So they really need this hand up when things go south on them, and through no fault of their own, they find that they are either they've been injured or they have to take time off to take care of somebody. And we know from I can tell you from previous guests that the situation for home care is dire. And often it does fall back on the family member because there is no one else who can come in and do it. And so we need to empower those families to help take care of their own members, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of these things are really interconnected. So we need to make sure we've got strong programs that work for all of us.
Thank you, Moriah. We will undoubtedly be able to have you back at some point, maybe to tell us what actually happened. So thanks again for coming in today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. These conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters.